Warriors get their seventh road win in a row last night in Madison Square Garden against a depleted New York Knicks team. Be clear about it. No OG Anunoby, no Julius Randle. And it was an ugly game. It was a scrappy, physical game. You know, you'd heard the headline this week that the NBA was looking into rule changes, kind of acknowledging and realizing that, hey, man, maybe it's too offensive heavy right now. What can we do to balance the game out moving forward? And last night at Madison Square Garden, it kind of felt like a little bit of a test run, a marquee matchup. And hey, what happens if we swallow the whistle and just let these teams play a little more physical? And it wasn't pretty, but sure enough, it wasn't just all offense, right? They allowed the defense to be physical. Now, Steph, who had been in a slump, came out of that slump very quickly. I think a lot of us expected that because he likes to show up in Madison Square Garden, right? History says he does. But as the Warriors were in control for most of this game because they jumped out to what was it, like a 14-0 start? You know, no one could hit a shot for the Knicks. The fourth quarter comes around and it's like, oh boy, here we go. Here we go. And to the Knicks' credit, they are a scrappy team. They want to make it look ugly, right? They have depth and they have a high motor players that allow them to stay in games. And the fourth quarter opens up and the second unit looks pretty good. What did we get? We got a CP mid-ranger, a Clay three, and a Trace lob and dunk. But then sure enough, the Knicks start climbing back in at 3-3. A lot of fouls. The foul line was an issue. And you know, full transparency here. Those of you that follow me closely know my take already. I thought we should have traded Chris Paul. I thought we should have traded Chris Paul as the season went on. And that's nothing against Chris Paul. I think he's been really good when he's played, and I've enjoyed him being on the team. But as Pajemski emerged and CP was hurt, right? It was like, well, probably can move him. We don't need him as much. We're a guard-heavy team. And then you consider the fact that when he is on the floor to close games or start games, you're having Steph have to guard up, right? We're getting even smaller. And I was told that, like, hey, man, he's going to really help close games. Like these fourth quarter woes, Chris Paul will tighten that up. And, we need him. I didn't really buy it. I didn't really buy it. But what I have to confess to is in those final 5 minutes last night, I was much more at ease with Chris Paul on the floor. I had far less anxiety than I typically do in those closing minutes, at least this season, right? And you saw them put him in the split action as the post because that's the decision maker, and then Draymond can be the screener. And there's just a steady hand of Chris and a steady ball handler. And not that obviously Steph has great handles, and we'll talk about that in a second, but Chris, with his built and how low his low center of gravity in that fire hydrant built, it's very hard to get under him and get the ball if you're digging at the ball. So yeah, I mean, it's just a one-off, right? I don't know if you can do that every night. Styles make fights, but last night they certainly needed Chris's steady hand because let's talk about this with Steph here. And Steph closing games is by nature is a daredevil, right? I think that's his nature, and he can't help himself. He can't resist kind of trying to make the high risk play. Draymond, he'll make high risk plays too, but I think it's more fed off emotions. Draymond can get too emotional and make emotional decisions out there. And look, Steph shot really well, and I thought in the second half he got a little greedy and he was trying to put on a show for the crowd. And you heard that great quote from Steve Kerr: solid leads to the show. Make no mistake about it. He was talking to Steph and Clay, in my eyes. That wasn't for the young fellas. That was for the vets and Steph and Clay, in particular, Draymond as well. And to shoot Steph a little bit of bail, because he did, right? You can see it where like once he's in rhythm, he's feeling good. We have a little bit of lead. He's like, all right, let me, you know what I mean? Like, let me put on a show. And part of it is the expectation of the crowd, I think, whether it's at home or on the road, even more so. All these people show up to see Steph. You saw DC pack the building. That Wizards team has 9 wins. They packed the building for Steph, not Jordan Poole, right? Not Kyle Kuzma. And so I think there's an added expectation he feels to put on a show. But we see how it results in careless play and, blowing leads. And so I don't know. How do you all feel? Like, do you think it should be an individual night by night basis who's closing? because that's tough, right? Because you eventually you always hear that in the NBA. You got to have your closing five. You got to have your closing five. And up until last night, I was pretty certain, yo, it can't be Chris Paul. We're too small. And I don't really buy the steady hand stuff. But it looked like it worked last night. And it wasn't too close for comfort, right? It ended up being a double-digit win. Let me not forget about the young guys, because to me, I think that that was the real story. And even in that fourth quarter, remember when Hart picked Steph at midcourt and they come back down and you're like, oh, he's gonna try to get his get back, right? The ego, the pride, all that. Let me bury a three in his face. And they're like, no, 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 no. Dante's on Kaminga. They toss it to Kaminga, spin baseline, left hand, and one. And I think we've all been asking for that down the stretch of games. Hey, just play basketball. Just play basketball. There was another instance, I know all of you saw this one, where Steph set a pin down screen. Moody comes off it, and Draymond waves him off and waits for Steph to relocate, right? And then, did you hear the mic'd up last night? To me, that was maybe one of the greatest mic'd ups of all time, at least for a regular season, because it actually gave you insight. It gave you insight with Draymond and Dante mic'd up. But he forces it to Steph. Steph misses the three. And then they go into the timeout, and Kerr pulls Draymond aside. He's like, hey, man, you can hit Mood there. Like, you can look for Mood there. He's open. He'll knock it down. And Draymond, knowing he was mic'd up, was very gracious about it. I'm not saying he wouldn't have been, but, went out of his way to let Mo, as he called him, like, hey, I missed you there, right? I missed you there. And to be fair to Draymond, I'm not sure he's even conscious of it. They've been doing it for so long. You understand why he does it, but he overhunts Steph, and it becomes predictable. And I thought I'm hoping there was a little bit of a turning the corner with that blatant miss of Moody. And then again late, like, hey, let's go to Kaminga. He eating, he cooking, right? He got 20, 25 points. Like, they can't guard him. Let's go to him. There's no need to force it to Steph. So I think that that's a positive moving forward. But also, how about Moses' defense? How about Moses' defense? Because when he was drafted, he was advertised as a 3-and-D wing out of Arkansas. And the defense wasn't what we thought, at least initially, right? He doesn't move that well laterally, but he's got a 7-foot wingspan. He's strong, high motor, he's tough, and, most importantly, he wants to defend. And it's taken him 2 seasons, year 3 now, I think, to really figure out the distance management, because your length does you no good when you don't distance manage well. It's the same thing in the fight game, right? A lot of fighters are tall, but they don't fight tall because they don't manage their distance. And Moses has all of a sudden I won't say all of a sudden, it's been a process, has really figured out how to manage his distance and utilize that length. And then he's got strength and he wants to do it. And you saw him down the stretch on Brunson, Burke, hollowing out, not letting them get into his chest, still being able to contest. So that's exciting. That's exciting, because I was never worried about Moses' offense the entire time. It was always like, well, can he defend a position on the floor? And for him to take that step and defend and play with the motor, that's really encouraging moving forward, man. By the way, Clay didn't close in that game. And we'll see if he's going to play tonight, back end of a back-to-back. The last I heard, everyone is going to play tonight. And I think perhaps the train of thought is, let's grab this Raptors win, because we probably ain't going to win in Boston on Sunday. No one does. And so I'm not really mad at that train of thought, but we'll see who closes out tonight. I was going to give out some underdog picks, but I'm going to lay off it. The Raptors are a weird team. It's a back end of a back-to-back, and I'm not sure what the minutes and rotations will be. So I'm going to lay low on the underdog picks tonight, but I'll probably have some for that Sunday game, right? I wish they would bring back the fouls, because there's going to be some crazy whistles on Sunday. Anyway, let me know what you guys think about this Chris Paul closing thing. Do you think they need to set a 5 and just go small because of the decision making? Does it need to be matchup based? Or are you in the boat of Chris Paul should have been traded and play Trace Jackson to close the game? I don't know. I think we just got to take it one game at a time at this point and keep racking up these wins. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.